Anyway, there's this film and it's got bottoms in it. Go on. Apparently.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in a way, that's one of the problems with the whole 50 Shades of Grey thing, is that talking about it immediately starts people sort of, sniggering because of the subject matter, because it's a film that's, nominally about sex, based on it's the first of a trilogy of novels by E.L.James, which were pot boilers dealing with BDSM, bondage, domination, sadomasochism.
Is that the thing, BDSM? Is that quite well known? Like,
yes, it is.
Having a PGCE. I've got a BDSM.
Yes, I don't think you set an exam for it in the
There's
same
probably
way.
someone in the BBC who's got BDSM written on there. Just because it stands for broadcast duty
exactly.
studio manager.
Yeah.
That's what it is. I'm the BBC's BDSM.
So
elsewhere it means what?
Bondage, domination, sadomasochism. So S&M, basically. The novels began life as a piece of Twilight fan fiction. That E.L.James was sort of writing this fan fiction on a website and envisaging these two characters who were sort of loosely inspired by the central characters in Twilight. That then developed a life of its own. Originally, I think it was called Master of the Universe or something. Anyway, developed a life of its own, was sort of taken away from the Twilight thing and became a story of its own right, which then became a publishing sensation. And now along comes the film. So the story, I'm sure that everyone is familiar with it, but just in case they're not, a young virginal student called Anastasia Steele is sent to interview billionaire Christian Grey, played by Jamie Dornan, who we've already established looks uncannily like Marquis Smith from The Fall. And during the course of her interview, she casts eyes on him. She sort of feels this frisson of excitement, and he...
Why does she do that? Why does she feel that?
Well, that's what the story's about. That she sees well, hang on, let me play you a clip and then you can ask me the same question. He, on the other hand, is interested in talking about her. Here's a clip.
Earlier you said that there are some people who know you well. Why do I get the feeling that that is not true?
Mr. Grey, your next meeting is in the conference room.
Cancel, please. We're not finished here.
Yes, sir.
No, I can go. It's fine.
I would like to know more about you.
There's really not much to know about me.
You said you're an English major? Tell me, was it Charlotte Bronte, Jane Austen, or Thomas Hardy who first made you fall in love with literature?
Hardy.
I would have guessed Jane Austen.
Vom.
So...
does she talk all the way through in that kind of
a lot of it?
Winsome voice.
Yeah, and I mean, believe me, that's some of the better dialogue. So anyway, what happens then is that she's sort of fascinated by him. He's unbelievably rich. He's got fast cars and he's got a private helicopter and he's got a glider, and exactly. And he is fascinated by her. But it turns out that what he wants, he doesn't do romance. What he does is his room of fun, and he wants basically her to become his slave in the room of fun. Where he will, where there will be sort of whips and chains and all the rest of it, and there will be contractually sort of drawn up arrangement whereby she will consent to this is what he likes, and she says, well, what do I get out of all this? And he says, well, what you get out of it is me. And the rest of the film, therefore, is whether or not she wants to go along with this, whether she wants to be the submissive to his dominant, and as a result, get out of it that she's going to have a fabulous apartment and she's going to have him, Christian Grey, but meanwhile she's going to have to explore a whole world of sadomasochism about which she doesn't appear initially very excited. So when they were first talking about the film adaptations of this, Steven Soderbergh and Joe Wright's names were mentioned, and they ended up with Sam Taylor Johnson, who actually is a very good choice, because if you look at Sam Taylor Johnson's back catalogue, she's done hardcore work in. She did one of the segments for Districted, which is a hardcore compendium that came out a few years ago, sort of provocative short films. She also made a short film called Love You More, which was written by Patrick Marber, which sort of demonstrated this sort of witty understanding of the potentially erotic frisson of cinema. Apparently, Marber was brought in to do rewrites on E.L. James's notoriously thick-eared dialogue, rewrites which were then apparently overridden by E.L. James, who demanded that the dialogue of the book was kept for the film. And you get the sense, therefore, that whilst Sam Taylor Johnson is an interesting choice for a director, she is completely constrained on the one hand by having to adhere to the dialogue, which is ear-scrapingly poor. There is no two ways about it. I mean, the dialogue really, it's kind of written in a in a way which sometimes when you read it, it's almost parodically bad. Although actually, what Kelly Marcel, the screenwriter, has done, Kelly Marcel, who wrote Saving Mr. Banks, is taken out the inner goddess stuff, and done something of a salvage job. But you get the impression that Sam Taylor Johnson is, on the one hand, between having to stick to E.L. James's, very, very problematic source, and on the other hand, having to work around the constraints of making an R-rated studio picture. And so, despite the fact that when Sam Taylor Johnson was talking about it, she mentioned things like Last Tango in Paris as being tonally significant, what you end up with is much closer to Adrian Lynn's 9.5 Weeks. In as much as it feels very toothless, it feels very anodyne, it has a very, very mainstream, middle of the road, sort of that standard sexist anxiety about displays of male nudity. And so it all feels very, very vanilla. The other thing is that in terms of its depiction of S&M, if you look back over the history of movies like, Barbette Schroeder's Maîtresse, we're not in that territory. We'd be closer to the territory of Jacques Anne and the story of O, which is,
don't know that.
Feels terribly well. Funnily enough, of course, when that first was submitted to the census, it was banned over here. It was considered to be a cause célèbre, but now, of course, it just seems terribly tame. But it's it's a similarly based story, and of course, the story itself has all these sort of archetypal tropes, which is that in the person of the billionaire, that's basically sort of tying back to the old aristocrat. If you look at Sartre, so the idea of the aristocrat who would take on the young and poor girl and somehow initiate her into these sort of strange perversions. So it comes from all that. And the problem with it is that because it feels so constrained, you just get the sense all the time. Firstly, you don't believe in any of the characters. Secondly, and you really genuinely don't believe in the characters. Secondly, that it's consumer porn in as much as what the film is really drooling over is the gliders and the cars and the apartment and all the rest of it. In terms of its it's much spoken of S&M. It's really, really very incidental and very, very downplayed and very, very at the edge of the screen. The performances, there doesn't appear to be that what you describe as electricity or connection between the two central performers, and you end up thinking on an industrial level, what's interesting is, like the first Twilight movie, this is a story. It's a film in which the three key creatives, the author, the screenwriter, the director, are women, and that makes it industrially interesting. But the fact of the matter is, artistically, it just isn't. It is terribly bland. It is terribly derivative of. There are nods to American Gigolo and American Psycho, but absolutely the thing which hangs over it is 9.5 Weeks. And you remember all the naffness of 9.5 Weeks, which is a film in which Mickey Rourke kept his trousers on and threw the contents of his fridge at Kim Basinger. It just feels awfully ordinary. Now, it's not terrible. It's not utterly terrible. It's certainly, there are things about it that you think, well, that's probably, I've, read bits of the novel. I have to confess I couldn't make it through them because the writing just completely finished me. I just can't, the writing is not great. And I have the sense that Sam Taylor Johnson is fighting with that writing as well, and with the sort of the ludicrous overrun. So it's not good, but it's not terrible. And certainly when the first reviews came out, as a result of it, everybody, the film being withheld from everybody, and then suddenly the premiere in Berlin, and suddenly everybody having to turn the reviews around, you did get the sense that some of those one-star screaming reviews were basically written before the fact. I've seen far worse films, and it is better than it could have been, but it's not anything like as good as it would need to be to win me over.